course of today and yesterday. Of course, I want to thank my wife, all of the trainers that did the breakout sessions, all of the speakers that did many things, all the people that come together, including you, that make a conference like this work. And so I want to thank you for your support. This is fun, it's a lot of work, but when it's over, it's like, damn, that was great, you know? And we'll be feeling that way tonight. So anyway, we're not finished yet. We have someone who is on your form, Andrei Illarionov. He is a brilliant guy, and I feel like we are becoming friends since I've gotten to know him. We spent some time yesterday, showed him a little bit of Portland. He, of course, is known for having been Vladimir Putin's senior economic advisor, and now he is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. He now fights for liberty and freedom, and he is a very intelligent guy and have a great deal of respect for him. So please give a warm welcome to Andrei Illarionov.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Richard and Natasha for inviting me to this wonderful conference because I found that it's extremely interesting, entertaining, and useful for me. And I was very much enjoying the conversations and debates that we had today. So if you don't mind, should we thank Richard and Natasha with warm applause? Thank you for bringing us all here and organizing this interesting conference. So I've been asked to talk about Russian economy, Russian politics, Vladimir Putin, and my own personal involvement in all these three things. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I will start with a little story. As you know, I came from Russia and I spent a substantial portion of my life in Russia. And when I started to write in English for English-speaking audience, or English reading audience, my good friends on English-speaking world told me, oh, come on, you're making a mistake, you're making strategic mistake. It is not the way how you can persuade English-speaking audience. It's exactly what Richard was talking earlier today. I said, what's wrong? What is a mistake? And they said, okay, look, you were writing in English like in Russian. Okay, I'm right, okay. But this is the wrong way to do it. Because there is a very clear difference between those ways how Russians are writing and English-speaking people are writing. What is the difference? And they explained me. Russians put the main idea of the text at the very end. So first of all, they have wonderful introduction, exposition, discussion, argument, and the final, the most important idea they put at the very end. And the text appears very interesting, very well balanced, and attractive, except not everybody finishes this text. Maybe starts at the early stages. And Anglo-Saxon texts are actually good. Anglo-Saxon texts are organized in a different way. They put the main idea at the very beginning. That is why the reader or listener, in the case of viewer, would understand the message right away. And after that, whether they agree or not agree, okay, would continue to listen or to read or to view or that, or just okay, to stop it and just go to the other business. So that is why, using this suggestion, I would start my talk with the Anglo-Saxon approach. I would give you the main ideas right away, and after that you will decide whether it's enough and you can walk away. Just, okay. There are three main rules and mottos in my life that may be relevant to you as well, and that I would share with you. The first one is always aim high, as high as you can. Second, always work for your aims. Work, run, fight at your full capacity. You know the rule, 10,000 hours rules. If you like to be good in something, professional, successful, you need to spend at least 10,000 hours to study this issue, to work on this issue. Even you are a genius. Genius can add 5 or 10% of success. All the rest is your work, hard work. So that is why, if you'd like to achieve something, you need to work all the time, and it will be hard work. And after that, you can be rewarded with success. And third motto, never give up. Remember what Winston Churchill said in the darkest hour of 1940. We shall never surrender. If you'd like to achieve something, never surrender. Continue to do what you think is important. Okay, and once again, you know the mottos, you know the rules. After that, you don't need to listen to the other stuff. But those of you who are still interested in the other stuff, I can tell you a little story how I became involved in the Russian economic policy and the Russian politics. So from 1989 to 1998, for 9 years, first of all, Soviet economy, when it was Soviet Union, after that Russian economy, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, was in the state of crisis, of deep economic crisis. You know what was the Great Depression here in the United States, from 29 to 1933. So the official estimate that GDP collapsed by 26% for 4 years, right? Russian Great Depression continued not 4 years, but 9 years. GDP declined not by 26%, but by 44%. Industrial output collapsed by 60%. Budget deficit was 23% of GDP. It had, because there was no way to finance it through whatever, T-bills and so on, the only way to finance it was through the printing money by the central bank. As a result of that was a huge emission of new money, and as a result, as everybody knows, was inflation. Cumulative inflation from 91 to 98, just cumulative for all these years, was more than 400,000%. If you understand 400,000%, it means that whatever savings you had before, they have been wiped out just to zero, nothing. There was nothing, just because it's nothing, there was nothing left. I could continue explaining what was the situation economically. Living standards of population went down, evidently. Unemployment jumped up. And the problem was that in addition to all these economic and social problems, there was a very deep state of psychological depression in the country. And among general population and among economists or policymakers and so on, many people were talking to each other, just something wrong with Russians. Because we try this, we try that, it doesn't work. Nothing works. So there's something wrong with us. Russians cannot work properly, so they cannot produce economic growth. Something wrong with the nation. And that state of the very deep despair was very widely spread in the 90s. Okay? So that was the time when I became economic advisor to the newly elected president. But before that, I will tell you that just even before that, it was in year 2000. Before that, I tried several times to make an impact on economic policies. In 1990, when there was the first relatively free election were organized even in the former Soviet Union, but for the Russian parliament, I ran for deputy, position of the deputy member of the parliament. Out of 12 candidates, I finished the third. So I was not elected, all right, but I tried. Okay, In 1992, I became the deputy director of the Working Center for Economic Reforms of the Russian government, and I was participating in the preparation of economic reforms and the monitoring of economic reform and so on. In 1993, I was invited by former Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, to be his economic advisor. I was for about a year, I was working as economic advisor to the Prime Minister. In 1994, I resigned from that position and organized my Institute of Economic Analysis in Moscow. The institute was just studying economic policy and producing recommendations. What would be the best way to start economic growth? And at this position, myself, I produced a own theory what should be done, and that was the idea, just to reduce the government, to balance the budget, to stop inflation, to deregulate the economy, and so on. It just was a long list. Only a few years later, I found a book in the Washington book shop. I was just visit in Washington. I found the book which was named Economic Freedom of the World. It was the first publication, Economic Freedom of the World, in 1996. I took it, I looked at it and found it's exactly what I was working on for all these years. But it was a group of people who were kind of with better access to data, with a wide range of information around the world, but it was exactly what I needed. Suddenly I grabbed the book, I called these people, I found them, so I became a member of the Economic Freedom Network around the world, and I started to talk with those people from Fraser Institute in Canada, with the Cato Institute in Washington, some other people. Now with more than 100 institutions around the world are forming this Economic Freedom Network around the world. Okay, nevertheless, in '98, I was trying hard to prevent economic meltdown in Russia, this kind of infamous August 1998 crisis, when Russian ruble was devalued, Russia defaulted, established capital control, and so on. It was a very hard battle. I tried to explain to politicians what to do and what not to do. They did not follow me, did not listen to me. They were busy with some other stuff, and after that was a huge catastrophe, economic catastrophe in Russia. But after that, in year 2000, it happened to be that Mr. Putin invited me to be his economic advisor. Twice I refused to join his team and to him. And finally, I was convinced, okay, I could try something to do. And when he invited me for the third time, okay, I said yes, but it will be very clear conditions on which I can work for him. It was a very clear contract. And I said, if one of those conditions, I put 3 conditions, if any of these conditions will be violated from your side, this is the last day of my work. Thank you very much, I'm leaving. He accepted this, and I started to work. And I can tell you what we've done at this position. And one thing I forgot to mention about this economic crisis that continued for 9 years. The government foreign debt of Russia grew up from 12% of GDP to 90% of GDP. Just to give you an idea. Okay, when I became economic advisor to the president, I produced a plan. It's kind of the plan for policy, and it has been accepted by Putin, and we started to implement it. Just and me, and Putin, and the government, and I have to kind of to say honestly that very big supporter in this plan was Putin himself. Without his support and without his energy and his power and his understanding what I'm saying, it would be impossible to do it. I was just advisor. I was not a politician. I was not a government bureaucrat. I was not even a minister, not only deputy prime minister, not prime minister. But what I was saying, almost everything has been accepted by Putin, and he was pushing those ideas into implementation for the cabinet, for the government, for the parliament, for everybody. So just that is why my kind of greatest supporter and kind of pupil and student in that business was Putin. And due to this kind of tandem work, we were able to do something that I can tell you. So first of all, I suggested to have a kind of big tax reforms. Russia at that time had 28 different taxes. We reduced the number of taxes to 7. We reduced tax rates, profit tax, VAT. Fortunately, United States do not have VAT, but okay, so we already had VAT. We reduced the rate. We have introduced flat tax, which means income tax, which has 3 layers, some kind of 10, 15, and 36% for different income groups. So we had just eliminated all these 3 tiers. So we introduced just one universal tax rate, 13%. So which means regardless what kind of income do you have, just you pay universally one tax rate. As a result of that, tax evasion disappeared fully. And as a result of, because many people criticize that because you are going to some kind of just to leave the budget without money, and the kind of the big, kind of rich people will not pay taxes as they do not pay taxes and so on. As a result, everybody started to pay taxes. And the amount of taxes in real terms next year more than doubled. Because most of people, certainly there could be some criminals, somebody who is trying to evade taxes, but most of people would prefer to pay taxes at a reasonable level and to be respected members of societies. And that is what nobody expected. We did not expect that it would be doubling of revenues in real terms, but it was what was happening. So my idea was, crucial idea was to reduce size of government, meaning the share of expenditures as a share of GDP. So there's a lot of expenditures that are not necessary. So when I came, it was 48% of GDP government expenditures. At the peak of our reform, it was 30% of GDP. So reduced by 18 percentage points of GDP. So we eliminated a lot of regulation, and we just closed several dozens of government agencies. Kind of, you have heard even today there are different boards how to participate. Okay, sorry, we eliminated many of them. Just that you would lose a chance even to participate in those boards, because many regulations are not necessary. So just we wipe them. So I also suggested to establish Stabilization Fund. Since Russia has substantial revenues coming from oil and gas, and the prices for oil and gas are fluctuating dramatically. So that is why if they stay high for some period of time, and the government is using all those resources at the same time, so it's kind of developing the habit to spend a lot. And after that, when prices collapse, so that is why they have a lot of obligations, they have a lot of tradition just to spend a lot of money, and people also accustomed to this high level of expenditures. So that is why it was not easy. I tried to persuade Putin, but Putin more or less came to this idea relatively quickly, but the cabinet was against this. So they were fighting fiercely. Think about $12 per barrel. So in the battle, I was not able to defend $12 per barrel, but essentially it has been established at the $18 per barrel. All revenues that come into the budget higher than $18 per barrel could not be spent. They should be accumulated in Stabilization Fund. You can spend only under the revenues that are being accumulated under this particular level. And those money that could be accumulated in the Stabilization Fund can be used, but only outside of the country. Never inside, because if they have been used inside the country, they would push real exchange rate upward, and which makes your economy, your industry, non-competitive, neither domestically nor internationally. So that is why it's kind of trying to kill with one bullet two birds. Okay, so first of all, to avoid these fluctuations in budget expenditure, and second, to make your economy more competitive. But there was another third reason. It was the government debt, which was at 90% of GDP. And the only way to use it effectively was to spend those resources from Stabilization Fund to pay out government debt. And that was a kind of the fierce battle between myself, which I was alone, and the cabinet, Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of Economy, Head of the Central Bank, the rest of the cabinet. And the battle was really fierceful. It just is kind of not like some people talking here, because, for example, when we are discussing that, I've been accused that I'm a foreign agent, I'm a CIA agent, who is going to destroy Russian economy and kind of destroying Russia with the suggestion to repay the debt. Okay, and that has been done by the former prime minister, who is now one of the opposition leaders. But it's just another story. Okay, nevertheless, finally, that battle has been won by me. So Stabilization Fund has been established. We started to repay the foreign debt, and as a result, you remember the debt was 90% of GDP, and after that it fell to 4% of GDP, which is the lowest lowest position in the world after one exception, Luxembourg. Luxembourg had at that time 1.2% of GDP. Okay, all other countries had higher kind of debt to GDP ratio. So also I was pushing for foreign exchange convertibility, foreign currency. So ruble was not fully convertible that time, so that is why you could not just buy any currency. It was done something in the current exchange operation, but not capital account operations. Finally, it has been done with capital account operations, and rubles became fully convertible currency. So just also, I became the Sherpa, kind of the high-level assistant to the president for G7, G8. You know, the group of seven at that time. Russia at that time was not a member of G7, but we had some relations. And I said, okay, so Russia deserves to be one of the members of the international community, and one of the most respectable places, G7. Let's try to become a full-fledged member of this organization. So it was 2 years of very hard work, and 2 years later, in 2002, Russia has been invited to become a member of, now become not G7 but G8, because Russia became the 8th member of this club. And so we became a member of this club. It continued until year 2014, when after the war against Ukraine and annexation of Crimea, so Russia has been kicked out of this organization. But no. And actually I was advocating heavily for that, because it's kind of not the way how respectable countries could behave the international arena. But initially, so it was done that time. So it was also a lot of stuff about the WTO membership and many other things. Anyway, so I can continue for long, because it was almost 6 years and I'm working every day. So there's a lot of stuff was done. Final results, some of the big results. You remember that was a 9 years of economic crisis with the contraction of GDP, industrial production and so on. Now, with introduction of those policies, we had 10 years of economic growth at more than 7% per year average. For 10 years, Russian GDP doubled. GDP per capita doubled. Personal consumption per capita, private consumption per capita, increased 2.3 times in real terms. Everything in real terms. That was the best period in economic history in Russia in record. Never before, never after that, Russian economy never grew like this. It was real boom, and according to whatever economic journalism, it can be called the kind of economic miracle. Because usually economic journalists call economic miracle when economy can double its size within 10 years. Not 1 year, it's kind of 7%, not 2 years, but for 10 years in a row. So we had 10 years in a row, it was doubling the size of the Russian economy. Okay, that's it. Kind of the basic story about economy. Now coming this kind of next chapter, the politics. While I was busy with economic policy, with different these instruments, how to start economic growth, how to sustain, how to reach the highest possible economic growth. Some of my kind of students in this economy were busy with some other stuff. They were destroying political freedoms. And Mr. Putin, at the same time, that's very important, was supporting in economic reform that could produce economic growth. At the same time, was doing everything possible to destroy political rights and civil liberties of the Russian population. For some time, okay, just I was concentrating on this stuff, even I was not blind, but nevertheless, I thought that it would be possible if there is economic growth, if living standards of population are growing, that is a creation of middle class, and the middle class would produce a very strong request for democracy and for supporting, sustaining democracy. But this view turned out to be not fully correct, but it has been done from practice. Okay, Putin was destroying these political freedoms, and I could mention many things, like in year 2002, when there was a North Coast siege, he ordered to gas hostages within this theater, and more than 130 people have been gassed down by Russian forces in the center of Moscow. In year 2003, they started attack on Yugos, the largest oil company at that time. They put Khodorkovsky, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, probably heard his name, the boss of this company, behind the bars, and they essentially nationalized the company. I was openly against that, and said that it's a crime. In year 2004, there was another siege in Beslan, it's North Ossetia, the North Caucasus, and by terrorists, but instead of freeing these people, so Putin gave the order to open fire against the school in which more than 1,000 kids, their parents and teachers have been held by terrorists, and 334 people died. And actually not only, and they opened fire not only with the kind of guns, but with tanks and with flamethrowers. So that is why they burned down the school with people and killing those people. So after that, I told Putin that I cannot be his Sherpa, because Sherpa is a personal assistant in G8, and I cannot be your personal assistant after that stuff. He did not believe me, he did not release me, but nevertheless I stopped this kind of Italian strike, so I did nothing and said I will not come back to that issue. So finally, 3 months after that, he fired me from this position. He replaced me with somebody else. But I continued with business and economic advisor. Again, the story is long, but just last story in this row. December 2005, I happened to be at the meeting in Kremlin with the leadership of the country, economic leadership, president, prime minister, head of presidential administration, minister of finance, minister of economy, head of the central bank, the leadership of about a dozen people. And they were discussing and debating what would be the best way how to steal $12 billion from the Russian budget. And okay, I was last to speak because everybody was making their contribution how to do it better. I was last to speak, and I said, okay, this is a crime. This is a crime according to the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. That is why it is absolutely unacceptable and should be stopped. Putin understood immediately that story, and he moved his chair back, and he said, okay, it's not me who proposed it, him. Who is him? Mr. Medvedev, probably you've heard his name. He spent about 4 years as a president of Russia a few years ago, and then he was the head of the presidential administration, and he was a lawyer by training, and he became a little bit red in his face, and he said, No, we had a conversation with lawyers, and we invented such a wonderful legal scheme that would allow us to do it. And I said, okay, just I'm not interested in your scheme because I know that at the point zero, T0, Russian budget has this 12 billion US dollars, but at the point T plus 1, these 12 billion US dollars will be relocated to the private accounts. So that is why it's, regardless how you would call, what kind of scheme you would prepare, this is a crime. Okay, they were not impressed with my comments. They continued to discuss it. And after that, I used my last card, maybe not last card, but serious card. I studied this case because I tried to do it with so-called IPO, maybe you've heard this initial public offering of public company, state-owned company, Rosneft, through which the proceeds from privatization would go not to the budget, but to the company. It's a great idea, right? Just you privatize something, but the money that would be paid for those shares would go not to owner of those shares, but to the management of the company. Great idea, right? Nobody. I actually called my colleagues in other countries and asking whether anyone was so inventive to produce such a wonderful scheme. And I found that kind of nobody understood me. Brits did not understand me, Italians did not understand. I called even Chinese, and the the head of economic department of Chinese Central Committee of Communist Party, because they were doing a lot of IPOs. When I explained the story, he's just, are you really calling from Kremlin, from the Russian president? Are you serious? Just, no, it cannot be. Because even for Chinese, it was absolutely unthinkable. Okay, I used those arguments as well. In this meeting, they were not impressed. But after that, I have a last card, because I studied this case very carefully, and I found that out of this 12 billion US dollars, there should be received from this IPO of this public company, Rosneft. All of them should go to the accounts of this company, to the management, but 1.5 billion would go to personal accounts of the management, not even to the company, for the to avoid for wonderful ideas, including the head of this company who was sitting across the table in front of me. His name is Mr. Sechin. Those who are following Russian affairs know his name. Okay, Mr. Sechin. I thought, okay, just you know, I told Putin, okay, do you know that your friend Mr. Sechin is putting 1.5 billion US dollars in his own pockets through this scheme? Putin immediately understood everything. He moved his hair back. It's okay, Igor Ivanovich, his name. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, that was a very dramatic situation. So these guys kind of stood up and I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, so after that it became absolutely clear that regardless how long I will be fighting this battle, it's clear that the boss is on their side, and sooner or later they will do it. So next morning I resigned, but before I called journalists to my office, and meticulously, within 1 hour, I explained all scheme that has been done, sent them they reported, and after that, thank you very much for this press conference. I would inform you that I'm resigning from this position. Okay, that was the end of my career as economic advisor. They asked me. They asked me, okay, forget about what you told us. We will never say to anyone that you are going to resign. Please stay here. It's very important that somebody like you would stay in the administration. Okay, no, cannot. They tried to convince me for 1 hour. We had this conversation about this. They failed. Okay, so that is why I resigned. Okay, now another chapter. This is the politics. I left the government. And I came back to my Institute of Economic Analysis that I established in 1994, and I was very active not only in economic debates but in political debates. About a year later, I was invited by Kate Institute here in the United States in Washington, and 1 year later I moved to Washington and working as a senior fellow with the Cato Institute. Over there I kind of brought the idea to Cato and to other colleagues, idea of index of human freedom. Before that, as probably you know, the Freedom House, starting from 1972, was producing Freedom Index for political rights and civil liberties. And they produce it every year. It's a very important indicator to understand the state of political freedom around the world. A bit later, since 1996, as mentioned, Fraser Institute, the Cato Institute, and some other started to produce Economic Freedom Index. Very useful instrument to understanding quality of economic policy around the world. Since I came from Russia, I said, okay, economic freedom is very important, political freedom is very important, but we don't have the measurement for overall freedom. Because it's a very important elements, but only elements. We need something that would embrace everything. Economic freedom, civil liberties, political rights, personal safety, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, everything. So, and we started a new project that took several years, several meetings, conference, brainstorming sessions, and as a result, Cato Institute for the last 4 years is producing Human Freedom Index, HFI. You can go to the site of Cato Institute, you have these publications. Now it includes all these elements. We're producing something that never existed before. Now the kind of Human Freedom Index can give you kind of the general idea of what is the state of freedom, not only in one area, but in most of those areas. But also I continue to be very active in the public debate in Russia. So I have my, the main instrument with, there was a lot of discussion about how to write a letter to editor, to publish article and so on. Since social media is developing so fast, so I found that personal blog is the best instrument because you don't need to write to editor. You need only to write the piece. The piece that can be interesting for readers. And that is why, because sometimes, okay, that's good, it's not good. You need to check this, you need to correct this. We will not publish it today, we publish next week or maybe next month, maybe we'll never publish it. And just the moment is lost. So I found that the personal blog is a very powerful instrument, and it is slightly longer than tweet, because in tweet you don't put much serious stuff. You cannot put graphs, you cannot put tables, you cannot put a lot of stuff, but in the blog you can do it. So that is why I started my blog in year 2008, and now it's already 12 years of this blog, and I put a lot of stuff there on different topics: economics, politics, international relations, law, sociology, psychology, history, military affairs, art, all of stuff. What I think is important at this moment. So just as example, what I did through the blog is kind of public investigations of the Russian-Georgian War, of the Russian preparation and attack on Georgia in year 2008, Russian attack on Ukraine and annexation of Crimea and the war in eastern Ukraine, the crash of the Polish airliner in Smolensk in year 2010 that killed the Polish leadership, the murder of Boris Nemtsov, one of the leaders of opposition, in February year 2015. In constitutional issues, for example, when Putin decided to just to violate constitutions and to be president, not 2 terms, but longer, you know, not 4 terms. Okay, these constitutional studies and many other stuff. As a result of that, the blog became very popular. According to the statistics that Life Journal has, it's about 2.5 million visitors a year. And in the Russian blogosphere, it is a 4th position by number of quotations, citations, posting, reposting, something like that. Is the 4th or 3rd or 2nd. So just last December it was the 2nd in the Russian blogosphere. Yesterday I checked, it was the 3rd in the blogosphere. So it means people are interested. They are looking. Whether they're reading, sometimes agree, sometimes disagree, but what is interesting, they are reposting. Because that's interesting, because by number of readers or by number of comments, it's not the very first, but by number of repostings, it's the third or second the blog in the Russian blogosphere, which indicates that there is some interest in what is being put over there. So, and kind of that is why I'm sharing my time between kind of this writing in blog and definitely articles and public speeches and so on, and my work at the Kate Institute on different issues. Human freedom is one of them, not only, but it's just one of them, the most visible one. Since I left Russian economy for that time, I can report you what happened with the Russian economy. Can you guess? Okay, since year 2008 until today, 11.1 years, Russian economy cumulatively grew 11%, which means approximately 1% per year. When I was economic advisor, it was 7% per year. And 1 year it was 10% per year. Now for 11 years, it grew 11%. So it's almost exactly as it was just 1 year when it was that time. So it is stagnation. There was some fluctuations, there was some crisis, there was some recessions, but there was some kind of growth. But on average, for 11 and a half years, it is stagnation. All right. So now, since probably I was talking already too long, coming to conclusion. Okay, the conclusion. And since I mentioned that there is two ways to persuade audience with the either Anglo-Saxon way or the Russian/continental way, I finished with the Russian way. Okay, with your permission, I started with Anglo-Saxon way, and now I will finish with the Russian way. I will repeat what I said at the very beginning. My three rules, my three mottos. First, always aim high as possible. Second, always fight for your high aims at your full capacity, non-stop. Third, never give up. Never surrender. Remember the words of Winston Churchill. I will just read it. In this famous speech he gave in June 1940. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and the streets. We shall fight in the hills. But we shall never surrender. You ask, what is our policy? And I a little bit rephrase Churchill's words relevant to our gatherings. I will say, what is our policy? It is to wage war not only by sea, land, and air, but by words, ideas, organization, with all might and with all the strength that the God can give us, to wage war against monstrous tyranny of non-freedom. That is our policy. You can ask, what is our aim? I answer in one word. It is our victory. Victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. Our goal is freedom, however long and hard the road may be. Thank you.
If people have some questions, so I will turn the mic back over. Now, don't leave when he's finished, because we have a couple of announcements from Young Republicans. Stephen's going to say something, but of course Western Liberty Network is not partisan, so we will also have an announcement from the Young Democrats, and then we will close. So, Mr. Illarionov will now take questions.
How are you able to keep your freedom and not be in prison?
Okay, I will repeat. The question was how I was able to keep my freedom, not in prison. First of all, in year 2006, about 1 year after I resigned from my position as economic advisor, I left Russia and moved to the United States. For some time, I did travel back and forth between US and Russia because I had my family, my mother, and so on. And I detected that I've been followed and the conversation is intercepted. It just, nobody should be surprised, at least myself, I was not surprised. And for some time I was doing this, but for the last several years I stopped to do it because it, from my point it became not smart enough. Okay, so that is why I don't travel to Russia right now. I cannot say that as a guarantee, because we know what's going on around the world and what happens with different people, but okay, that's life, and we do understand the all risks and all these problems, but okay, it's just we could minimize them, but we should take it seriously and responsibly. Mm-hmm. All right? Yeah, please.
In your close cooperation with, you just repeated, did Beijing have any relationship or coordination with Moscow on your economic model?
Beijing?
Beijing, China.
China.
Did they copy any of your model at all?
Okay, if I understand correctly the question, were there any cooperation between China and Russia on economic policies, right?
Using your model.
Well, I never heard that Chinese would use this approach, and seems to me not, because it was economic freedom, and Chinese communist government is partially interested in economic freedom, not fully, but partially yes. And moreover, I can tell you kind of the so-called great secret. One of the elements of my economic policy suggestions have been borrowed from China. Because what Chinese Communist Party did something that they never talked publicly about it. They have dramatically reduced the size of government between 1979 and 1995. They never say it publicly. They never put in any reports. And all international organizations like IMF or World Bank never mention this because it goes against their policies and their ideas. But in 1979, the size of the government, meaning the government expenditure as a share of GDP in China, was 36%. So it looks like not too much, but it was a very underdeveloped, very poor country. And for such a country, it was a tremendous burden. It was impossible to carry. And within 16 years, they reduced the size of government to 13%, 1-3. Unbelievable. And they did it under the slogan, "Let's build communism." we can kind of understand the joke that they put on that. And they never said, okay, they said, we're building communism with Chinese specifics or whatever. But essentially, they did massive deregulation of economy. They reduced taxes, they reduced expenditures and so on. As a result of that, what we know, the Chinese economic boom, Chinese economic miracle, that brought these millions, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. This is a little trick. We know the Chinese at the same time not only established, they continue to sustain this political dictatorship in the political area. But in economic area, especially at that time, they have liberalized the economy very substantially. So that actually produced this unbelievable economic growth that we can see right now. So that is why I look at this and I understood that that's the trick. This is the most important engine to start economic growth. And I actually try to persuade Mr. Putin, look at Chinese. They're smart enough not to spread this idea around the world. But why should we be so blind not to use this experience and not to use in our case? So we did not go to 13% of GDP. I advise to do to 15. I was very conservative in this regard, as you can see. Okay, but we went to 30% GDP, and it was enough to kind of to generate economic growth of 7% per year for 10 years.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes,
So
Lee.
I'm curious if you would like to comment on Vladimir Putin's move that he did a few weeks ago, where virtually his entire cabinet resigned.
All right. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Putin 2 weeks ago gave the so-called State of the Nation address, in which he suggested, first of all, constitutional changes, and second, he fired his cabinet of Mr. Medvedev. Okay, as for constitutional changes, it is after that he talked a little bit publicly, and after that he kind of sent his proposal for changing constitutions, at least for 40 articles of constitution. So the kind of actually he's rewriting constitution, and the idea is very clear. He would like to, instead of authoritarian constitution, he would like to have essentially totalitarian constitution, because all these changes have the same aim to increase power of the president. And I wonder who would be that president. Okay, so it just because it created a little crisis, kind of a little political crisis, because everybody's looking what is constitution, what's going on, so on. Just it's really hard to imagine that he's preparing all this stuff just to give these enormous powers, even compared to those powers that he already has, to somebody else. Just it's rather hard for me to imagine, right? So that's one story. The second story is this firing of government of Mr. Medvedev, and still we do not understand fully, and myself as well. And there are several ideas, several hypotheses have been put forward. My understanding of that is that Mr. Medvedev is certainly he's known, but he's called sort of a systemic liberal. So it's kind of certainly he's a very corrupted person, but he's not from KGB person. He's not a KGB person. Okay. And the guy who is now the prime minister, he's from KGB. So that is why before that we had some kind of this tandem between KGB/FSB officers, kind of political police, and some civilians who are working with them together, kind of to providing technical expertise. Now those people who were providing technical expertise were fired, and essentially all positions in the power are taken by the officers of KGB/FSB. So that is why it's a little bit coup d'etat. It can be called as it is, because if before that was some kind of the two main political forces were driving the political regime, with clearly the leadership of the political police, no doubt. But now there is no second political force. It's only political police. So that is why it looks like the kind of the general idea that it's a kind of the regime of political police, and actually that regime is the unique in the world. You need to remember, if you look around, you can find even many cases of military junta or whatever, military dictatorship. You can find cases of dictatorship that is run by a person, or by a family, or by a particular tribe, or a particular ethnic group, like in Syria by Assad, or some others, or party, definitely, Communist Party within China or the former Soviet Union and so on. In the whole world history, you would not find a single case of the dictatorship that is run by political police. No, not a single case. In the Nazi Germany, Gestapo was a very powerful organization, but they did not have full power. Full power belonged to Hitler or to NSDAP, to political party. And Gestapo was used as an instrument, very powerful, very strong, devastating, but only instrument. In the former Soviet Union, KGB was very powerful, but the power was in the hand of the Communist Party, and KGB was used as an instrument. And from time to time, either Stalin or somebody is kind of dismissed and even killed his leaders, his commanders of the political police. This is the first time in the history that the political regime is run by officers of political police. You would not find any other single cases. So that is why it makes this case so unique, so special, and that is why this regime is so hard to analyze and compare with others, because it's incomparable. Because people using usually, some people say militocracy. Militocracy means the regime is run by military people, like military junta in many Latin American countries. But they're different because the kind of type of thinking of those people is different from type of thinking by political police. So that is why this is a very unique, very special, unusual, and that is why many people around the world just do not understand how to deal with it. Let's have somebody from that side and we'll move here. Yes, please.
Could you please tell me what is going on in eastern Ukraine? We just don't seem to hear too much about it anymore. Do you know politically, is there still a lot of the fighting, and we know what Russia wants to do?
Okay, the basic facts are known. So there is a war. The war is being waged by Russia, by Putin, by Kremlin against Ukraine, and they're trying to destabilize. So first of all, they annexed Crimean Peninsula with Sevastopol and so on, and they started so-called uprising of separatists in the east of Ukraine. Certainly, this is a Russian-sponsored and Russian-financed, with Russian officers everywhere and so on. So the idea is to destabilize Ukraine and to make Ukraine vulnerable, and finally to get not only this particular reason, but the whole Ukraine under control of Kremlin. That's a very smart. Once again, this is a kind of confirmation, a continuation of the previous discussion about what is the difference between militocracy or whatever, political policracy or whatever, because it's a different way. For military, it would be just to get the piece of land, and that's all. Putin is very smart. He wants peace, but not only that little piece of land, he wants whole Ukraine. And that is why he's using this instrument just to destabilize whole Ukraine, to kind of to make it tired of this war, of people being killed and so on, just to establish full control over Ukraine. And unfortunately, this new president, it's my personal opinion, new president Vladimir Zelensky, who has been elected by landslide election, 73% voted for him, turned out to be extremely weak, to put it politically correctly. And essentially, he was giving up to Putin on each important element. So, and now, because Putin understood that Zelensky is really weak, psychologically, politically, personally, whatever, just he's not very knowledgeable because he never did any political job or economic job and so on. He's giving all interests of Ukraine one by one. And now Putin understands that this is a unique opportunity to really establish this control over whole Ukraine. And in December, he had this so-called big press conference. He said something that for anyone who is familiar with the history of that part of the world became like a signal, because he started to talk about these lands in Ukraine belong to Russia. He said Pre-Chernomorye. Pre-Chernomorye is kind of the lands near the Black Sea, as is Ukrainian territory. And he said, okay, it's never belonged to Ukraine, which is certainly a lie, but doesn't matter. But it showed that he's interested, and he publicly said that he's interested in this territory, not only in Crimea, but in the whole stripe along the northern coast of the Black Sea, from the eastern border of Ukraine, this Donetsk, Lugansk, back to west to Moldova, to Transnistria, to establish land corridor, at least. But if you listen to his speech last year on May 9th, he started to talk about historic Russia. And that point has not been captured, for example, by Western media at all. Wow. Just nobody reported about this. But historic Russia has a very clear connotation, and actually Putin himself has written an article in the year 2012 where he personally described what does it mean historic Russia. He said, historic Russia is a Russian empire at around the year 1800. It's kind of his words, it's a citation, no problem, it's a public article, everybody can do. And the Russian empire around the year 1800 included fully Belarus, in most part of Ukraine, with the exception of Galicia and Transcarpathian Ukraine and Bukovina. All the rest of Ukraine within so-called historic Russia. So that is why he's not even hiding his views and his vision, his agenda, and his policies. So, and it is very important that he talked about historic Russia last year, not in the article published in some newspaper, not even the kind of gathering of academics. He talked about this at the military parade in Moscow, when thousands of military people stood in front of him, and he was giving them orders as a chief, whatever, commander-in-chief. What is the goal? So that is why he wasn't never hiding his kind of intentions. So now with the very weak Ukrainian president, he thinks that he can achieve.
Wow.
Yeah. All right.
One
Yes,
more
sir.
question.
I got a question. So when after America established its government, Benjamin Franklin came out and said, or when the people asked him, like, what have you given us? Either democracy or I think it's or a monarchy. He said a republic, that's if you can keep it. Implying so the American government is not as easy to hold together because we are all responsible and have to be competent and stand up citizens to make it function. So as you created that freedom index, how about what's the options of creating an index that would be named something like a national democracy readiness index? So to assess the population of a country, to know if it's close societally, economically, on all levels to become a functioning democracy, since the U.S. does promote democracy around the world, and I've never heard of any country being always not ready. Every country seems to be ready, but is there a good point where a country is not quite ready to become a full democracy?
All right, this is a big question. No, that's true. It's a big question not only in the length, but in the kind of the depth. And this topic has been heavily discussed in many places. First of all, the first suggestion whether to introduce any particular index, you are very welcome. You can create your own, and just we'll check whether it can work and how can we use it. As for the deeper question, whether every country is ready for, I would use not your word democracy, I would use the word freedom. Right? Because democracy is an important element, but it's only part of freedom. Freedom is more important. And the democracy is a part of freedom. It's a part of, it's a political element of political freedom. It's not the only, but it's part of political freedom. So that is why it is very important whether every society, every nation is ready for freedom. And there is a big debate. Some people say, okay, some ready, some not. Okay, if those who are not, they should be treated in a different way, and so on. I do not subscribe to this view. We understand that different nations and different societies have different level of education, different exposure to different ideas, and that is why, let me tell you, very important thing, because people are mixing it heavily and wrongly. Mixing two things that sounds very similar, but they're very different. Modernization and westernization. Many people around the world, not only in the United States, would consider as a synonyms, as a same kind of, they put comma, modernization, westernization, and some people even don't like westernization because it's something not nice. Okay, so just let's talk about modernization. This is the two very different things. Modernization is building skyscrapers, or metro, or some kind of wonderful airports like China is doing. Just you can have to modernize, they have a put kind of water, clean water, and so just there's really some this is a kind of progress. It's okay, it's good, it's fine, nobody is against it. But westernization is a different one. Westernization is bringing ideas of freedom, of liberty, of human rights, of freedom from imposition from the government or from criminal gang or something like that. It's organizing self-governing societies. It's a rule of law, it's a division of power, it's many other things. that have been invented in the West. First of all, it have been, those ideas have been invented in Western Europe, in different countries. And after that, step by step, they have been created. The first free country in the world, Dutch Republic, in the 17th century. After that, those ideas have been moved to Britain, and they developed there. After that, with pioneers, they moved to the United States. And with those bases, those ideas started to spread around the world, where they have not been invented, they have been imported. And the very big battle, real battle of ideas, is going about acceptance or non-acceptance of Western ideas. Ideas of liberty, freedom, division of power, limited government, human rights, and ability and necessity to defend those values with all possible resources. With words, with ideas, with organization, and if necessary, with some other instruments, as it was during the Second World War or during the Cold War. Because, as we discussed this early on, you can convince, you have a chance to convince your opponent if the final goal of your opponents is the same or similar to yours. If they would like really to help humans, maybe other humans, maybe with different ways. Yes, maybe you would have a debate about tactics, but strategically you're on the same page. But if your opponents are trying not to help humans, but they're trying to destroy humans and humankind, part of humankind or all humankind, you will never find a common ground for those people.
Right.
And that is why it's absolutely, you need to understand it, that sometimes it's impossible to win the argument with them, with words. It's just impossible. And they would like to use, as we have seen in the world history, they are ready to use force, violence, coercion, and weapons to destroy you, free people. And if free people were not able to defend themselves, their family, their property, their nations, their institutions, their values, it will be finished. If the United States would not help Europe during the Second World War, Europe will be enslaved, either by Hitler or by Stalin. But in both cases, it will be enslavement.
Wow.
It's absolutely clear. Anybody who studied the history of the 20th century understands it very well. Just if it's not intervention, military intervention of the United States that saved Europe from enslavement.
Wow.
That would not happen. So that is why this is a much larger topic that has been discussed here. But you need to understand that to defend freedom, certainly it's better not to use these military methods or force, certainly better not. But you need to understand that you should not forget about this. You should not forget about the Second Amendment of this Constitution. Is it your personal life? Is it your personal life or in the public global life? Because Second Amendment, this is the final instrument to defend freedom. Thank you.
Fantastic. We have a keeper relationship with this guy. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Andrei. That was magnificent.